And welcome to Hannity. So tonight it was billed as the debate of the century, and it did not disappoint. Now, last night's presidential showdown between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton was the single most entertaining and most watched debate I've ever seen. And facts are just facts with Nielsen ratings, and it highlights just how out of touch, I argue, the mainstream media is with you, the American people. Now, a female viewer to this show sent us a note. I think it sums up perfectly when she said this. She said, "I thought he did well until I started watching the after shows and they mentioned all of the lost opportunities." Now, if you listen to the elites in the punditry class that are on television and radio, they almost universally, they think Hillary Clinton won that debate. But millions of you, Americans, voting online, you thought Trump won the debate. Let's take a look at a few of them. Drudge Report. They had Trump winning 82-18. CNBC, 68% think Trump won. Time Magazine, 55% for Trump. Breitbart, 76%. Fortune, Trump wins there. Slate Magazine, and it goes on and on and on, as you can see. Now, to be fair, the Clinton News Network, CNN, they did have Hillary winning, just to be fair. And as you can see, there are many, many others. But the question is this: how could the mainstream media try to say otherwise? Now, the answer is actually quite simple. There are two very different standards by which the debate you saw last night is being judged. Now, just look at these numbers from Gallup. Congressional approval rating now at 20%. Look at this. Trust in the media just hit an all-time low. Only 8% of the American people think that they have a great deal of trust or deserve a great deal of trust. And we also cannot ignore that in almost every exit poll in the Republican primary, remember this? It showed a majority of Americans, Republicans, felt betrayed by their leaders in Washington. Now, this gets to the heart of what happened last night. Now, if you're a typical journalist, typical politician, you're using a standard that I argue no longer exists for real-life Americans. Now, these prepared zingers of Hillary, written by somebody else, perfectly memorized, robotically uttered by her, that's old school. That's outdated, and I would argue out of touch. Now, the core of Clinton's argument remains the same. More taxing, more spending, more regulating, and basically repeating all of Obama's failed economic policies, except she's going to take demonizing corporations, attacking the rich to a whole new level. Now, she'll be President Obama on steroids. Are you ready for that? Have the last 8 years been good for you? Now, Clinton also fundamentally denies the truth about how dire the economy really is, but the American people feel it, just like Lester Holt, in his opening question, denied the reality of where we really are as a country. Here are the real numbers that Lester should have brought up. Now, we have the lowest labor participation rate since the 1970s. Almost 95 million Americans are out of the labor force. America's now had the worst economic recovery since the 1940s. The country has the lowest home ownership rate now in 51 years. There are almost 13 million more Americans on food stamps, another 8 million more Americans in poverty. Over 43 million Americans live in poverty. Median household income, that's lower than it was in 2007. Today in America, 1 in 5 American households don't have a single family member in the workplace. 1 in 6 American men, ages 18 to 34, they're either in jail or out of work living in mommy's basement. And President Obama will leave office having accumulated more debt than every other president, all 43 other presidents before him combined. Now, African Americans, they have been disproportionately impacted by these failed policies. There's been, since Obama's president, a 58% increase in the number of African Americans on food stamps. There has been a 20% increase in the number of African Americans who are not working. They're out of the labor force. Now, this is the great divide. Americans know this. You're living this. These are real people, real suffering brought on because of Washington, D.C. So the debates about the old standard, let's memorize our lines, let's regurgitate them robotically, and let's get our zingers in there that somebody else wrote, well, that's disconnected from the real suffering of real people caused by government. Now, my overpaid friends in the media, well, they have their chauffeur-driven limousines. They like their fine steakhouses and expensive wine lifestyles. None of them are feeling this, the people you're watching on TV. And therein lies the contempt. Now, how can we afford all that Hillary Clinton proposed last night when we have $20 trillion in debt and $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities? Watch this.
Let's have paid family leave, earn sick days. Let's be sure we have affordable child care and debt-free college. We can deploy $500 million more solar panels. We can have enough clean energy to power every home. We can build a new modern electric grid.
I thought that was what Solyndra was all about, shovel-ready jobs that weren't so shovel-ready. What she's proposing is mathematically impossible, and that's where the disconnect exists here. In the African-American community, Donald Trump rightly brings up that in Chicago this year alone, over 3,000 people have been shot. And of course, 3,676 people have been killed since Obama became president just in the Windy City. And somehow Hillary Clinton says, well, everything's just fine. Now, we have failed the African-American community, and also we're failing the country. They're failing schools, crime, poverty, drugs, and as you know, the list goes on and on. And Hillary doesn't seem to care about these facts. The media doesn't care about these facts. They just want the vote every 4 years of black Americans, and the Democratic Party demonizes Republicans and calls them racist. It shows you just how disconnected liberals, and the media are from reality today. Obamacare is another perfect example. Now, Lester Holt last night, he didn't even bring it up or point out that Clinton wants to expand the big government program that is crushing you, the average American. Remember all those broken promises about keeping your doctor, keeping your plan, and saving $2,500 per family per year? None of that happened. The average family lost their doctor, lost their plan, and are now paying, on average, $4,100 more per year for employer-sponsored plans. Now, friends in Washington, D.C., they don't seem to care about this. They have great plans. And the same goes for our friends in the media. They have great plans. And on foreign policy, we've got another huge disconnect. Hillary Clinton can't even say radical Islam. That didn't come up last night, except for Donald Trump. But the elites in the media, they don't care about that either. And they're also refusing to acknowledge the death and destruction that she created as Secretary of State. They want to talk about birtherism. Well, ISIS is now spreading all over the globe, including right here in America. Libya, complete chaos. Iran, the largest sponsor of state terror, they got $150 billion richer thanks to Hillary and Obama and that nuclear deal. And all the gains, 5,000 Americans fought, bled, and died in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Ramadi and Tikrit and Fallujah and Mosul has all been given back to ISIS by way of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's bad policies. Now, Hillary says it's a mistake, but what if it was your son or daughter that died? Flat out ignoring and disregarding the thousands and thousands of American kids who lost their lives and limbs, and her saying it's a mistake, we need to learn from it. Now, my point is, D.C. politicians and the media, they don't seem to care that much because either they're not the ones fighting, bleeding, and dying, and they're not the ones suffering. And therein lies the pole divide. The media, they have their spin. The pundits have their spin. The politicians have their spin. But you, the American people, in poll after poll last night, you saw a very different debate. Here with reaction, the editor-in-chief of LifeZette, nationally syndicated radio host Laura Ingraham, and he's also a Fox News contributor and nationally syndicated radio host Herman Cain. I have never seen, Laura, a disconnect like this. You got this list of polls, Donald Trump wins. You watch TV, Hillary Clinton wins. You agree with this? Disagree with this?
I think there's a divide that runs through almost every issue that has animated this campaign season, Sean, from the effect of globalization, these big trade deals that Hillary claimed last night she was so skeptical of, which was ludicrous, the immigration question, how we should process things like health care and the refugees, and how we should even pursue our foreign policy interests and goals. That divide has been there for actually a long time, and we kind of papered over it in 2004. The Republicans came together and elected George W. Bush. But for some years, we really haven't dealt with that divide. And I think a lot of candidates came along and they rejected this idea of a more populist conservatism that Trump has, I think, embraced. And they just decided they weren't going to do that. Trump takes these issues, and as a billionaire, he comes off more blue collar than a lot of the guys who've been in Capitol Hill for a long time who claim they have blue collar roots. And I think last night you saw that authenticity. He doesn't do this for a living. He hasn't been debating for decades in Washington, but he is, he has common sense and pragmatic thinking, and he's frustrated that America is moving at a glacial pace with a non-recovery recovery. That frustration at times came out last night, but I think people understand he's frustrated because he wants America to grow and to be prosperous, to be safe, and for people to be happier. So I thought that part of it really hit people last night. Even if he missed some opportunities to score some points, the authenticity is real.
I would agree that maybe he should have been defensive at times, like about his taxes or some other issues. And can you imagine, Herman Cain, going into this debate that I would tell you that the moderator wouldn't bring up the Clinton Foundation, the deleted emails, wouldn't bring up Benghazi, wouldn't bring up whether to vet refugees or build a wall or Supreme Court justices or Saudi Arabian money that Hillary takes? None of those things came up by anybody last night, but they did talk about birtherism.
Sean, your opening monologue was the best statistical monologue you've ever done. And what you have basically illustrated, and I'll get to your question in a minute, is that when America has a cold, Black America has pneumonia. Thank you for saying that. And here's why. Many Black voices won't tell the truth to the Black community. You just did. Donald Trump is telling the truth to the Black community. Now, you're absolutely right. I thought Lester Holt and NBC that they were going to rise above showing their liberal bias. They didn't. And the reason that they didn't is because of the liberal bias that they showed by not asking about the things that you identified. That was probably my biggest disappointment in Lester Holt and NBC. Now, the fact that he said, these are my questions, no. Those were NBC's questions, and it showed that that bias was there. Because if you look even further, and one of my callers on my radio show today pointed this out eloquently, the questions to Trump were leading questions to put him on the defensive. The questions to Hillary were all layups, and Lester didn't do any follow-up questions. So thank you for saying what a lot of people will not say, especially Black voices.
Sean, I think that Herman's right. Of course, Holt didn't bring up any of those things. The questions were very personal, went to so-called scandal or misdeeds, supposed misdeeds when it came to Trump. None of those other things were mentioned. But this is where it's really important for the nominee to say, no matter what happens, I'm going after the Clinton Foundation. I'm going to hit the corruption in Washington. We're going to hit the skyrocketing cost of health care. Going to go after her position on refugees. And we're going to hit the pay to play at the State Department, using her position to sell access and speeches for her husband and donations to the foundation. No matter what happens, you as the candidate need to get those points in. So I think you'll see that happen in this next debate. I
agree with that.
That will happen. But you just have to get it in. Hillary did that. She did that with his tax returns.
I think she fired every bullet in her gun, every attack, every memorized robotic attack that somebody wrote for her, she got in. And I would agree. I think there's an opportunity on all these issues I mentioned, deleted emails and the server and the Clinton Foundation and Benghazi and I think there's an opportunity for Trump to bring all those things up. But the fascinating things, Holt interrupted Trump 41 times, Hillary 7, asked only 6 questions of both candidates, but 15 questions only for Trump. And it was wrong on Iraq, the economy, and stop and frisk. He was wrong on three Candy Crowleys in one debate. We'll get to that later. But the online polls show Trump won. What do we take out of that versus the punditry class? That's what I want to ask both of you.
I think this election is about whether you think we're going in the right direction or not. Hillary has a record in public service. Trump does not. Trump was a private citizen. Yet she's trying to hold him to the same standard that she won't even hold herself to when she was Secretary of State or Senator from New York. So that's one thing. People are looking at the country now, the crime in the streets, the out-of-control borders, the stagnant economy, and their dreams being dashed as we cater to the dreams of illegal immigrants. I think a lot of people are sick of that. He has to just keep coming back to those same Sean and jobs questions. She's never created a single job. I think that's what most people want. They want a future that is bright, and they want truth to be told to them. And that's what he did for the most part, I think, last night.
Herman, there was one big test for Trump coming in. Can he be presidential? I think he passed that test with flying colors.
I think he passed that test. He was calm. And the fact that the online polls said that Trump win, it's not about winning or losing, but it points out what you talked about earlier. There is a disconnect between the American people and the liberals. And the fact that the online polls were so overwhelming in favor of Trump, that said that, yes, the liberals and the Democrats think the American people are stupid And those polls show they are not stupid.
And by
That's
the way,
the bottom line.
This happened in the primary, too. It's going to be fascinating. It's a fascinating 43 days from now. Guys, thank you both.
Yes.
And coming up, we have highlights from Donald Trump's rally tonight in Florida. But first,
you are going to approve one of the biggest tax increases in history. You are going to drive business out.
and last night, Trump hammered Hillary Clinton over her disastrous economic proposals. Austin Goolsbee, Ari Fleischer, they weigh in next as we continue.
To approve one of the biggest tax increases in history. You are going to drive business out. Your regulations are a disaster, and you're going to increase regulations all over the place. And by the way, my tax cut is the biggest since Ronald Reagan. I'm very proud of it. It will create tremendous numbers of new jobs. But regulations, you are going to regulate these businesses out of existence.
Donald Trump last night going after Hillary Clinton over her economic proposals. And after a very strong debate performance, Donald Trump is now back on the campaign trail, holding a rally in the key swing state of Florida. Here are some of those highlights.
Oh, we are going to win Florida so big. It'll be amazing. This is a movement like they have never seen before. Never. Last night was very exciting, and almost every single poll had us winning the debate against crooked Hillary Clinton. Big league, big league. She is as crooked as they come. For 90 minutes, I watched her very carefully, and I was also holding back. I didn't want to do anything to embarrass her, but I watched her, and she was stuck in the past. For 90 minutes, on issue after issue, Hillary Clinton defended the terrible status quo, while I laid out our plan, all of us together, to bring jobs, security, and prosperity back to the American people.
Joining us now with reaction, former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer and former Obama economic advisor. He got us into the mess, all the statistics I told you about in the last segment, Austin Goolsbee. Let's talk about the difference between so many online polls and the media punditry class. What do you think?
Well, first of all, the polls are not scientific, but they all point in one direction. And I do think, why are all these media organizations taking these polls if you can't talk about these polls? So today they hammered Donald Trump for referring to them, but they're the ones who published them.
CBS, Slate, Time Magazine.
You can go down the line. There were many. And they do. They're for clickbait. But if they're going to do it, then what's wrong with Donald Trump? That's exactly right.
It shows an enthusiasm. Do you think that what I'm saying is true, that the old model paradigm, zingers, memorized lines, fed to you by somebody else, I don't think it's going to resonate. There's no better debater in the country than Ted Cruz, national debate champion. And he struggled with Donald Trump.
Well, history shows that it doesn't really matter who wins or loses a debate. The voters make up their minds on a whole wider range of issues. So this election's testing so many things people used to take for granted that Donald Trump proved wrong from the primaries all the way through now. The question is, can he close the gap? He's still, according to the average of the scientific polls, is down 2 to 3. What I'd like to see him do in the next debate, Sean, is cool it down a notch.
Really?
Yeah, because I thought Hillary came across as calm and cool. Trump came across as hot. And I think she got to him and needled him on a couple issues where he became too defensive.
I think that's the best you're going to get. That's my take after. It was not what it was like in the primary. I thought he was actually very disciplined, especially at the end of the debate. Austin, what's your take on all this?
Well, look, online polls, that's not what you want to look at because they're not representative.
13 of them, 14, they mean nothing, right?
They're not representative. If you set a bot to just keep voting, you can get massive voting in favor of one candidate. Obama has been a beneficiary of online polling in debates when everyone agreed and the actual polling showed that he had not done well in the debate. So I wouldn't convince yourself.
What about
that
the economic statistics, all of which are true that I laid out in the first segment?
Well, look, as I told you last night, Sean, they set a low bar for Donald Trump and he banged his head on it. You know he didn't win when he had a victory party that he was scheduled to go to, and he skipped the victory party. You don't skip the victory party.
He's never had a drink in his
victor.
life. I don't know if a victory party was ideal for him.
Look, he organized it. I think he would be better to follow Ari's advice and try to tone it down and bring his A game to the debate. Because granted, it was a different venue than the primary debates that he had, but he did not do well.
I disagree, but I would add two things to what he did. Number one, I wouldn't answer Hillary's questions about tax returns until she's willing to give us her Wall Street speeches, which I'd love to see those. And the second thing is, I think there's a lot of information. He can bring up Benghazi. He can bring up vetting refugees. He can bring up deleted emails. He can bring up Saudi Arabian money.
And he forgot to bring up the Supreme Court and immigration, two issues that he wants to run on. Look, I call it in and out. When your opponent accuses you of something, you get in, you rebut it really fast, you get out, and you turn it around on them. He spent 2 minutes explaining how he was against the Iraq war from the beginning. 2 defensive minutes. He should have done it in 15 seconds and then turned it against Hillary. That's what he needs to do smarter.
In other words,
yeah, he hadn't. Look, Sean, you are trying to disparage somebody who actually did debate prep and calling Hillary Clinton robotic. People are saying about Donald Trump that they think he didn't do his homework and he didn't make an effort. But I disagree. I think it's hard work to make yourself look as bad as he did.
When
she accused him,
you're very clever. Here's the problem, though,
of stiffing small business.
You
he spent 3 minutes saying it was to help his family.
If you're suffering under the economic
moment
policies that you helped put together, that has resulted in 12 million more Americans on food stamps and 8 million more Americans in poverty and a doubling of our national debt, facts, and 95 million Americans out of the labor force, I don't think it matters that she memorized a quip or a line or an attack, because why double down on stupid?
Man. You got to get out more. The sun is still shining during the day. You may have seen this morning the consumer confidence numbers came out for America.
Yeah, okay.
American
and he still
consumers
accumulated
have the
more
highest
debt than 43 people
since
before him combined.
2007.
You ignore all real facts, and you say, well, the GDP, and that's not affecting somebody that doesn't have a job, that's in poverty and on food stamps. I know you're a rich professor, but you're not the normal person.
You're the rich guy. I'm a teacher. I will trade bank accounts with you. Let's trade.
No, I'm not doing that.
I'll just take one of your bank accounts.
You want something for nothing.
I'll happily trade.
He'll just tax it from you. He doesn't have to get it.
He'll have Hillary confiscated. Exactly. All right, we got to go. Coming up, Clinton wasn't asked about the Benghazi terror attack that left 4 Americans dead at the debate last night. Was she given a pass? Mark Geist joins us next, along with retired Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, and later tonight.
The African-American community has been let down by our politicians. They talk good around election time, like right now, and after the election, they said, see you later, I'll see you in 4 years.
Donald Trump continued his outreach to the African-American community last night. Larry Elder, Niger Innes, they'll weigh in as we continue. Straight ahead.
President Obama and Secretary Clinton created a vacuum the way they got out of Iraq. Because they got out, well, they shouldn't have been in, but once they got in, the way they got out was a disaster. And ISIS was formed. You started the Iran deal. That's another beauty, where you have a country that was ready to fall. I mean, they were doing so badly. They were choking on the sanctions, and now they're going to be actually probably a major power at some point pretty soon. Hillary has experience, but it's bad experience. We have made so many bad deals during the last, so she's got experience, that I agree, but it's bad experience.
Donald Trump going after Hillary Clinton's abysmal record during her tenure as Secretary of State last night during the debate. Joining us now is one of the co-authors of 13 Hours and one of the American heroes during the Benghazi attack, Mark Geist. Also with us, the author of The Field of Fight, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn. Both happened to be in the audience last night. I would have liked to have heard a little bit, Mark, about Benghazi, a little bit about her failure. Not one question to me, but they wanted to talk about birtherism, which I thought was ridiculous. What was your reaction in the audience?
Well, you know, Sean, I think it just goes to show the bias that was there with the moderator, with Lester. You know, they never followed up on any question. Donald Trump was the only one who brought up anything about the 33,000 emails, and then it was brushed aside by the moderator. And, I think they missed an opportunity to show America the type of leader that she's going to be. I mean, we have to look and see if this is the type of person we want who's going to be leading our country that ended up putting people in harm's way for strictly her political gain. That goes back all the way to 2011.
General, if you look at the money for the Clinton Foundation, if you look at the email server scandal, the money they took from Saudi Arabia, if vetting refugees, building a wall, not talking about Benghazi, Supreme Court, they missed a lot of serious issues here last night.
Let's get right down to the brass tacks here, Sean. The birther issue was raised and Benghazi was not raised. The birther issue didn't result in 4 dead Americans. The birther issue didn't result in a failed nation state in Libya. I mean, so for that not to have come up is unbelievable. So what we have, Sean, and this is the big decision for the American public, and I will tell you, millions of Americans are jumping on board with Donald Trump because this is a change election, and Donald Trump and millions of Americans are unbound by the past failures of the last 8 years, and the startup of that was where Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State. I mean, we're talking about a past that has caused the rise of the Islamic State, and now we're talking about the Islamic State-inspired attacks in somewhere around 25 to 30 countries. Now, we don't even know how many, but just an unbelievable. Also, the contribution to numerous failed states, as well as one other aspect, I think, as well as allowing our military to atrophy. I mean, those are the past failures that this election is causing the American public to wake up and say, hey, we don't need this any longer. We don't need this type of past set of failures. And frankly, this goes back for 30 years, Sean. So this is a big change election. And frankly, as I looked at and I was there at last night at the debate, I saw Donald Trump being very presidential. He was sticking to policy. He did not, get down into the lows of some of the things that Hillary Clinton raised. I mean, the business about racism and really talking about, stop and frisk. I mean, they were so wrong on those issues. And those are the kinds of things that the American public will hear more and more about this week.
And Lester Holt himself was wrong about stop and frisk.
Yeah, he was totally wrong.
Iraq.
I mean,
he was wrong about the economy. I mean, he got everything wrong.
That policy, Sean, that stop and frisk policy is a constitutionally correct policy, and it has led to a lot of lives not being lost.
The judge was thrown off the case, but we're running low on time, guys. Good to see you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And up next tonight, right here on Hannity.
The African American community has been let down by our politicians. They talk good around election time, like right now, and after the election, they said, see you later, I'll see you in 4 years.
Donald Trump, during last night's debate, continued to reach out to African American voters. Larry Elder, Niger Innes, they're here. Coming up next tonight on Hannity.
The African American community has been let down by our politicians. They talk good around election time, like right now, and after the election, they said, see you later, I'll see you in 4 years. The African American community, look, the community within the inner cities has been so badly treated. They've been abused and used in order to get votes by Democrat politicians, because that's what it is. They've controlled these communities for up to 100 years.
All right, that was Donald Trump reaching out to African-American voters last night, all while pointing out that Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, they have been taking for granted African-Americans and their vote for decades. Joining us now, nationally syndicated radio talk show host from the Salem Radio Network, Larry Elder, and chairman of the Tea Party Forward Movement, Niger Innes. Larry, I listened to that and I said, yeah, that's true. Failing schools in inner cities, 58% increase blacks on food stamps since Obama's president, 20% increase black Americans out of the labor force since he's been president, disproportionately impacted by statism, socialism, and the Democratic Party. Reaction.
Absolutely, but I wish he had talked about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, Sean, and that is the absent black fathers. The reason that 70 3% or so of black kids are born outside of wedlock is because of the welfare state. Policies that have been pushed since the so-called war on poverty by Lyndon Johnson that have incentivized women to marry the government and allowed men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. It wasn't Larry Elder or you or Breitbart or Heritage who said this. A kid raised without a dad is 5 times more likely to be poor, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in jail. That was Barack Obama. The question is, what's happened to the black family? And the answer is the welfare state has destroyed it, and the Democratic Party has blood on their hands. I wish Donald Trump would have taken this audience of 90 million people and explained that to black people and severed this ridiculous bond that black people have with the Democratic Party that has absolutely hurt them in terms of families, schools. You can't take your kid out of a bad, underperforming school because of the wedding that they have with the teachers union. Minimum wage. A black kid used to be at one time in this country, Sean, more likely to have a job than a white teenager. But minimum wage has made them not be able to price themselves under the going rate. Democrats have done all this to black families, and Donald Trump should have brought that home. He had a chance to do it, and I wish he'd do it in the second and third debate.
All right, Niger, if you take 2 issues, the wall, illegal immigrants competing with Americans for jobs, 95 million Americans out of the labor force, disproportionately impacting the black community in America, and you take the issue of getting rid of Common Core, top-down, Hillary Clinton, NEA-supported education, give it back to states, local communities, $11,600 per student we spend, you can transform not just black America, but the entire country.
Absolutely. You know, put on top of that an idea that a friend of mine down in Florida gave to me, and it's a brilliant idea. He says, unplug the Department of Education and replace it with Trump Opportunity Scholarships. That would blow away
In other words, take the
Party.
$11,600 per student per capita we spend for the worst results, considering the amount of money we invest, and give it to the families and let the families decide what schools. And I would think the families would decide the schools that actually require excellence in uniforms and discipline, no gangs, no drugs. You know, go to school, hands on the desk, apple for the teacher, and go.
And it's the civil rights revolution of our time. And actually, Trump has said that as he visited cities like Detroit and Milwaukee. He's gone into those cities, said the civil rights of our time is education. I'm going to promote school choice. If he were to do that with Trump Opportunity Scholarships, it'd be amazing.
And Larry, that is predicated on a belief that every child is born with innate talent and ability, and we just got to give a little sunlight, a little food, a little water, and lo and behold, there's no telling, you know, the heights that people can reach if they have that foundation of a good education.
And it's based on not telling black people that they are victims. According to the Washington Post last year, 965 people were killed by the police. 250 of those were black. 500 of them were white. Just a handful of them involved people that did not have a weapon or were not otherwise charging a police officer. By contrast, 400 people were injured by lightning last year. It is rare for anybody to be killed by the police, let alone an unarmed black person. But the Democratic Party has convinced black people that they're victims, and they go in there like lemmings and pull that lever 95% for the Democratic Party, and it's got to stop.
Does that change this year, Niger?
I think it is going to change this year. I think what terrifies Democrats is that Trump is resonating in the black community, and I think he could get anywhere between 15 to 20% of the black vote.
Wow.
That happens,
I agree.
it's
It's
game
electoral
over.
landslide.
You agree, Larry? You agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. You know, the number one reason the blacks voted for Obama was not because he was black, but because he was a left-wing Democrat and black, and they assumed he was going to help the economy. As you know, black net worth down, black poverty up, the home ownership down, home equity down, the so-called wealth gap between a black family and a white family hasn't been this wide in 25 years. Obama has not delivered on the primary reason that black voters voted for him.
All right, guys, thank you both. And coming up next tonight, right here on Hannity.
He didn't ask her about the emails at all. He didn't ask her about her scandals. He didn't ask her about the Benghazi deal that she destroyed.
Donald Trump, he shares his thoughts about last night's debate. Moderator Lester Holt, Doug Schoen, Mercedes Schlapp, they weigh in, and more straight ahead.
He didn't ask her about the emails at all. He didn't ask her about her scandals. He didn't ask her about the Benghazi deal that she destroyed. He didn't ask her about a lot of things that she should have been asked about. I mean, you know, there's no question about it.
Why do you think that is?
About her foundation. Why? I don't know. I mean, you know, I didn't think he did a bad job.
All right, Donald Trump on Fox and Friends talking about last night's debate. Here with reaction, Fox News contributor Mercedes Schlapp, author of the brand new book, Putin's Master Plan to Destroy Europe, Divide NATO, and Restore Russian Global Power and the Influence there. Author Doug Schoen. I got it backwards a little, but you know what I mean.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, they didn't talk about Obamacare. They didn't talk about emails, except Trump brought it up. They didn't talk about Benghazi, vetting refugees, the wall, the Supreme Court, her money from Saudi Arabia and all these Sharia countries, or the Clinton Foundation. They missed a lot.
Well, they missed a lot, but also, in fairness, Donald Trump missed a lot.
He should be bringing it up if they don't.
I think we talked before the debate, change and corruption. Donald won the exchange, Sean, I thought, on trade. He made it clear that 30 years was too long, but there were so many openings for him to say we need change, a new direction, radical new approach, and most of all, talk about corruption.
You know, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. Mercedes, is that a case where maybe whatever the question's asked, he's just got to kind of do what Hillary did and recite or memorize lines? Is that something?
Look, I think that if the moderators are not willing to bring up the tough questions, Donald Trump cannot wait. He can't afford to wait. He's got to make sure that he makes his case about the fact that there is this lack of transparency coming from Hillary Clinton, the pay-for-play activities, the serial pattern of dishonesty. And I think that this was a lesson learned for Donald Trump from this debate. And so I think for him, it's going to be critical to move and pivot towards focusing on Hillary Clinton. Whenever the focus was on Donald Trump, that's when he was just trying to, as one campaign advisor said, he's guilty of just answering directly.
Yeah, you know, there is some truth to that. When Hillary brings up, I want your tax returns, well, he did bring up the deleted emails, but he could have also said, as soon as you release those speeches, you got paid $250,000 an hour for.
And, you know, Sean, that's the place where good preparation comes into play. From what I know, the Secretary of State prepared, and Donald was not as assiduous. Had he had those kind of response lines, we might have had a very different...
Let me ask you this, because it's very interesting. There seems to be a disconnect between the punditry class and people, real people.
Yes.
And that, to me, is my fascinating takeaway from this. But that existed in all the primary debates.
Right. And
it doesn't matter that she robotically memorized it.
It exists here. I think this will not change the underlying poll numbers. Not really. I think it'll be stable, maybe a point or two for the secretary. But we're in a tie, Sean. We were in a tie before. We're going to be in a tie after the dust settles.
Mercedes?
Well, I think, I really wanted Donald Trump to close the deal. I think it was a learning experience for him. I did feel that Hillary Clinton really came across as sort of a mean school principal who was going to put you in detention. And I think for Donald Trump, what he needs to learn are, I call them trigger words. If Hillary Clinton calls you a racist, how should Donald Trump respond? Sean, basket of deplorables.
Yeah.
If she says Donald Trump is hiding something, if Donald Trump is hiding something, he needs to be automatically thinking, well, wait a second, Hillary Clinton, you've been hiding your emails, you hid your private server. So I think that's going to be key.
You know what's interesting, though? Short of Trump University, she used everything she's got.
Right. And
he's got a lot left in his arsenal.
She's going to keep using it
again and again
because repetition is the key to politics. She knows it. She does it well.
The key is Hillary cannot connect. The passion is with Donald Trump. That is why you are seeing the poll numbers quickly shift. And I think for Donald Trump, he performed like he had to perform. Next time, he's got to close the deal.
All right,
and he didn't close the deal, nor did the secretary.
Thank you both. Coming up, when we come back, we need your help. A very important, kind of predictable question of the day. Straight ahead. And time for a question of the day. So, really simple. Who do you think won last night's debate? Just go to Facebook.com/Sean Hannity, at Sean Hannity on Twitter, or Hannity.com. Let us know what you think. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left this evening. Let not your heart be troubled. We'll be back here tomorrow night. Thanks for being with us.